Hello Sociology students, Tree Hall here, and the purpose of this video is to go over the Unit 2 writing project, which is an essay about change. This is a fairly simple essay to write, although there is one kind of monkey wrench in this whole thing. Believe it or not, it's kind of a compare and contrast essay, and those essays are organized a little bit different than a regular essay. So if you're watching this video, I promise you that I will help you organize this essay and you will come out of this video with a solid plan of attack. So also, if you're looking at this in teacher notes, the slideshow that I'm filming right now, it's a PowerPoint. You can download it, or even if you're on a Chromebook, you can at least view it by clicking the link that's in there. So anyway, let's get through this, and I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible. So first of all, let's take a look at the topic. What would your day be like if you got up one morning and suddenly found that you had changed in a big way? That's how this begins. How would you react if you suddenly became physically challenged or elderly person overnight? As you go about your day, think about everything that would be different if you were disabled or elderly. What challenges might you face? Write down several things that stand out to you. For example, if you were on a sports team, would you be on that team if you were disabled? Perhaps you'd be playing a different sport altogether. Use your imagination to picture a day lived as an elderly or physically challenged person. You will need to come up with many differences and details in order to have enough material for a good essay. Your paper should be 5 paragraphs long. By the way, in my class, that means about 600 words because that's a decent 5-paragraph essay. So that's a standard that I'll pretty much always use to measure you on. Follow standard essay format. Your essay must have an introduction, 3 paragraphs in the body, and 1 concluding paragraph that ties your paper together. Be sure to correct spelling, grammar, and punctuation before you submit your essay to your teacher. Okay, a couple things right off. First of all, did you notice how many times they mentioned day and how many times they mentioned change? This is an essay about how your day or daily routine would be different if you were suddenly disabled overnight or suddenly very radically physically changed. And I think that's the very first thing to understand when you're writing this essay. It's about a day in the life of you, but you, a different you that has been suddenly disabled or changed. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to have to do before you write this essay is you're going to have to decide how you have changed. I had sent you out a weekly announcement about poor Gregor Samsa, who woke up one morning as a 6-foot-long cockroach and went to bed at night as a human being, woke up as a cockroach. And of course, that's a pretty massive change. And it's a kind of an interesting, funny little book if you read it. But the first thing that you have to do before you go to write this essay is you're going to have to decide how you've changed. Do you want to be in a wheelchair? Do you want to be mentally disabled, physically disabled, or do you want to be instantaneously older, or any combination of those? What you want to do if you're considering writing this essay right now is you want to take a second and write down your change. I'm just going to say wheelchair bound for the purposes of this, because I wouldn't call myself a super active guy, but I walk around a lot. I do a lot of things outdoors and things like that. So this would be a pretty huge change if suddenly I was in a wheelchair all day. Of course, I guess I could still do my job because it's not very physical. Anyway, second thing, and again, these are these 2 elements of this essay. You want to consider your normal daily routine. So what is your usual routine? What kind of schedule do you follow? What kind of activities do you normally pursue and like? How physically active are you? How dependent on others are you? Where do you live? Where do you work? Where do you go through the day? These are the kind of things that are affected if you had a disability. For example, in my house, I live in a 2-story house. If suddenly I was in a wheelchair, that would kind of be a problem because all the bedrooms are upstairs and I'd be good on the downstairs. We might have to move my bedroom to downstairs. So these are things that you want to kind of think about as far as what you're going to write about. Another thing, this is all stuff we're doing before we write the essay. You might want to take a list, or you can steal mine, of the ways that a disability or physical changes would affect daily life. 1, it might affect your routine. 2, it might affect your mobility, your activities, your independence, where you work or how you work, your entertainment, your relationships, health or well-being. This is not an exhaustive list, but I came up with this after a few minutes, and this is something you can do. This is going to become very important when we go to organize the essay. So these are just some things to think of before you even start to write. Now, as you begin to move towards writing the essay, What is normally the first step has now become our step 4, and that is you turn the topic into a question with a question mark. This kind of already has this. So our topic is what would your day be like if you got up one morning and suddenly found you'd changed in a big way? That's pretty much your essay topic. I just reworded it slightly. How would you react if you suddenly became physically challenged or you found that you had changed in a big way? How would you react if you suddenly I said that. As you go about your day, think about everything that would be different if you were disabled or elderly. What challenges might you face? Now, do you see how day is underlined here twice? This is the weird part. The actual topic of your essay is your daily routine. And that's important because, you think you're writing about change, but you're actually writing about a daily routine. Or if you want to think about this more correctly, how a sudden physical change / disability would affect your daily routine. And so I think that's important for clarifying your essay. So your real topic question here is, how would your daily routine change if you were suddenly disabled? Now, turning the topic into a question with a question mark is important for 2 reasons. One, it clarifies what you're going to be writing about. Again, underline daily routine. This is about a day in the life of you, but it's about a day in the life of a changed you. And that's important because that's going to affect everything about your essay. The second reason that it's important to turn the topic into a question with a question mark is your thesis statement, which comes at the end of the intro paragraph, and your whole essay revolves around your thesis statement is like the hub of a wheel with spokes. That answers this question. Now, if someone was to ask the question, how would your daily routine change if you were suddenly disabled? And the answer was, donkeys live a long time. No one's ever seen a dead donkey. Something is wrong with that answer. If you asked someone that question, they answered that way, you just look at them like, is something wrong with you? Your thesis statement should contain words from the topic question. So you would say something like, my daily routine, ever since my disability of blank, my daily routine is suddenly very, and then you put there, very different, there's a lot of different things that you can answer there. But your thesis statement has to answer that topic question, and in a way, your entire essay is going to revolve around this. Now, once you've turned the topic into a question with a question mark, the next step is to organize your essay. So it says it's got to be a 5-paragraph long essay. All essays are a stylized piece of writing, just like a haiku is a stylized piece of writing. You have to follow the rules when you write an essay, and all essays have 3 parts. Intro, where you tell them what you're going to tell them. Body, where you tell them. And conclusion, where you tell them what you told them. If you can write a big, long piece of writing, but if you don't have an intro, body, and conclusion, it's not really an essay. And again, in this essay, this entire essay is going to answer the question, how is your daily routine different once you've had this huge change? Now, in a typical essay, the body is the longest part of the essay. In a typical essay, a body is 60 to 75% of the total length of the essay. A good 5-paragraph essay is about 600 words. In 600 words, if 75% of that is about 450, you cannot write that out as one paragraph. It would look like a one whole page paragraph, which kills your reader. So what typically happens in a longer essay of 500 or more words is you're going to break that body up into pieces, which in here we have 3 main points. In a 5-paragraph essay, your first paragraph is always the intro. That also tells us what the last paragraph is, because a conclusion is a restatement of the intro, so it's about the same length. So within a 5-paragraph essay, you always have 3 body paragraphs, and that kind of answers the question. If your paper is a standard 5-paragraph format, how many body pairs you have? You have 3. This becomes important because if you can just figure out what to put in your 3 body paragraphs, you're 90% home when you're writing your essay. Which, speaking of, let's move on to that. So, one thing I need to mention before we need to move any further is this is a special type of essay. This is actually a compare and contrast essay. In other words, you're going to be talking about before and after your change. Now, what happens when you write a compare and contrast essay is everybody faces this big temptation to start the essay, give their first body paragraph like before, and then they go to an after in their middle body paragraph, and then in their final body paragraph they kind of talk about both before and after. If you do that, know that 2 of your body paragraphs are going to be off topic. What you actually have to do in a compare and contrast essay is you have to talk about both items in each of the body paragraphs. Now remember, what you're actually talking about in this essay is how your daily routine has changed, which means that in each body paragraph you need to talk about the old daily routine and the new daily routine now that you've changed as a human being. And so that's something that's important to remember, and you actually have to do that in all three of these. So another way to look at this is that in each of your body paragraphs, or main points, however, whichever words you want to use, you're going to be discussing before change and after change. This is actually a good thing because this will help us when we write our body paragraphs. It'll make them easier. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, once you've started to think about organization, the next thing that you have to do is create an essay map. This is where you actually have to fill in words, like this is what I'm going to talk about in my body paragraph. Now, we already gave a list of the things, the ways that a disability would affect somebody in their daily routine. And one way might be mobility, another might be activities. You know, obviously, if I am in a wheelchair, snowboarding is going to be more challenging for me than if I'm not in a wheelchair. If I'm blind, reading is going to be a little more challenging for me. So you have to actually come up with that list, which we already did, and then what you have to do when you make an essay map is you have to pick 3 of these. Now, why 3? Because we have 3 main points in the essay. So what I did on this, and you can pick any 3 you want, but what you want to do before you move any further is pick 3 ways that your daily life would change if you had a disability. So what I did for mine is I picked mobility, because, you know, obviously if I was in a wheelchair, I'm getting around differently. I'm not really cruising up those stairs, and I'm probably not going out for a jog. So I pick activities and independence. I may need help if I'm in a wheelchair versus the way I am now. So these are 3 things that I would do. And then you put them. What an essay map does is it gives a word or two for each paragraph that you do. So in your first paragraph, that's your intro para. You're going to introduce the topic. In your second paragraph, you're going to talk about how your daily mobility has changed, or how your daily routine, the mobility side of your daily routine, has changed as a result of your disability. In your second paragraph, you're going to talk about how your disability has changed your daily activities. In your third body paragraph, you're going to talk about how your disability has changed your daily independence. You know, how has this changed for you? And then you're going to come up with a conclusion. Okay, now, once we have our essay map, now we're actually kind of ready to write the essay. We kind of know what we need to do. Now, intro, conclusion, detail. A good intro is about 5 or 6 sentences. It's not quite as long as a body. And inside the intro, you have to do 2 things. You need to introduce your readers to the topic, who, what, where, and when. And then at the end of the intro, you have to provide the thesis statement to answer the topic question. Now, first of all, the thesis statement is usually 1 sentence. Sometimes you can elaborate and make a second sentence on there, but generally a thesis statement is 1 sentence, which means in 5 sentences, what you have to do is you have to introduce the readers to the topic. Now, because this essay is about how a massive physical and or mental change disability would affect your daily routine, a good way to begin is to describe your physical change. Maybe you want to talk about what happened to you. You need to do that over about 5 sentences. So if you need to include some information about the old you, that's fine too. But basically, what you need to do in that introduction is you need to explain to the readers how you change, so that, or what has changed with you, so that your readers are going to understand how that's going to affect your daily routine. So they'll have a background for when you answer this question. So in conclusion, once I transitioned to the wheelchair, my daily routine was greatly affected in my mobility, in the activities that I chose, and in my independence. That gives everything the readers need to do. Now, don't forget, when you get to the end of the essay, a conclusion is a restatement of that intro. It has to remind readers what the topic was, and then it restates or remind readers what the thesis was. Now, again, this becomes important. If you start to shove facts in your conclusion, you're actually making your conclusion into another body paragraph. There's no real facts that go in this. The conclusion is a restatement of the intro. So when you get to the very end of that essay, go back to that intro, and then again, the conclusion is tell them what you just told them. You're just reminding them of the points that you made in the intro. Okay, now let's go to body paragraph detail. Now, this is important. A good body paragraph is about 7 or 8 sentences each. And basically what your body paragraphs do is they answer the topic question just like your whole essay does. Now remember, your entire essay, and you start in the intro paragraph, is going to answer the question, how would your daily routine change if you were suddenly disabled? What your body paragraphs have to do is they have to answer that question in a topic specific way. So remember how we chose mobility, activities, and independence? So how would your mobility be affected if you were suddenly disabled? Notice how we've got most of the words of the topic question, but we've also got mobility here. In my second body paragraph, and I would answer that in 6 to 8 sentences. How would my daily activities be affected if I was suddenly disabled? I have to answer that question in 6 to 8 sentences. It's a stretched out answer, not a 1-sentence answer, a 6 to 8 sentence answer. How would my independence be affected if I was suddenly disabled? Again, I answer that in 6 or 8 sentences. Now, what you're doing when you're answering the topic question in a very body-specific way is you're giving your entire essay kind of a unity. That is how your essay revolves around the thesis, and that is how your main points directly support your thesis statement. Hopefully, as I'm going over this makes this easier for you. Now, let's talk a little bit more detail. Remember, the body paragraphs have to be 6 to 8 sentences long, and all of them are essentially going to answer that question, how would your daily routine change if you were suddenly disabled? Now, again, because this is a compare and contrast essay, you need to think of this a little bit differently. Remember, you're going to address the topic question, but because this involves change and it's compare and contrast, each of your body paragraphs needs to address 2 items: life before and life after the disability. So, going back to the mobility, what I would do is when I get to that body paragraph, I begin with my topic sentence. Before my wheelchair disability, I ran around all the time and I was very physically active and did things that involved running and jumping around, blah, blah, blah. But after my disability, then I had to get used to a more sedentary lifestyle, sitting around. That's a 1-sentence answer to that question. Now what I do, I've got 6 more sentences left in that body paragraph. I spend the first 3 sentences talking about what my mobility was like before the accident, before the disability. So I would say, I was the type of person that walked around, blah, 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 blah. I didn't need anybody. I didn't need a special car to get around. I didn't blah, blah. I do that for about 3 sentences. That's not too hard to do. Next, I take the next 3 sentences and I now describe my new level of mobility. So now I find that I can no longer get up the stairs. That's not an option in my house, so we have to do something different. I have to live downstairs. My car has got to be a special car, blah, blah, blah. I do that for 2 or 3 sentences. When you think about writing an essay, it can be kind of daunting. You're looking at 600 words. Oh my gosh. When you break it down into these little pieces, then it becomes much, much easier. Can you talk about mobility without a wheelchair for 3 sentences? Can you talk about what it's like to get around without a wheelchair for 3 sentences? I think that's pretty easy to do. You can go up and down stairs. You don't need a special car. You can walk around. It is amazing if you think about this. Like if you thought about what if I was in a wheelchair and you start walking around to all the different places you go, you will discover, and I learned this by taking a class, and I was talking to a guy who was in a wheelchair, and he said, look around you and see. A lot of places are not handicap accessible. They're not wheelchair accessible. They haven't, there's a lot of places do have ramps, but a lot more do not. And then when you get into people's homes and cars, I mean, if you had a wheelchair, you have to have a special car, and there are all these different things. Then you talk about you use 3 sentences to talk about mobility. Let's talk about activities. We do the same thing. You would talk about all the activities that you did before your disability and then how that might change on a daily basis after the disabilities. Again, you're always talking about what you do in a normal day, but you're doing it before or after here. Now, this is important. Doesn't matter which order you put these in, as long as you address the before or after in each paragraph. Remember, this is an essay about change, about how your life would change if you had this disability. Now, Hopefully, this has given you the tools you need to write your essay. And again, you've got this PowerPoint. I am more than happy to work with you one-on-one if you need more help. But I hope that I hope at this point you are feeling like, yeah, I think I could do this. So don't forget, as you go to write this essay, that remember your entire essay, all 5 paragraphs of it, are going to answer the question how your daily routine would change if you were suddenly disabled. You do not have to use my main points, but you could. Remember that in your essay you're coming up with 3 main ways that a daily routine would change if you were physically disabled there. So mobility would change, activities, independence. I mean, you don't have to choose mine, but there you are. And there you and once you finish talking about those 3 different ways, you restate your thesis and intro in the conclusion, and there you have it. You turn in an essay that's a pleasure for me to read. So I hope that this little video has helped you. Again, I am happy to come back and give you any additional help with that if you need it. And feel free to reach out to me via email or give me a call at 559-2533, and I would be happy to help you. Thanks for watching my show. Bye-bye.